Good afternoon and welcome to NHA's Path to Clean Energy webinar in partnership with the Energy Storage Association. My name is Cameron Schilling and I am Vice President of Market Strategies and Regulatory Affairs here at NHA. Hydropower is one of the oldest sources of power and was first used over 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece for grinding grain and later for sawing wood and powering manufacturing. In the late 19th century, hydropower even launched America's first foray into arc lighting, but a lot has changed since then, to say the least, and hydro's job description is changing once again. So with the introduction of new intermittent resources like wind and solar, the grid is in need of additional balancing resources like hydropower, pump storage, and importantly, batteries. Already, these resources are providing essential flexibility to act as an integrator of renewables and a provider of essential reliability services. But for the US to make significant progress on decarbonizing the electric sector, it's clear we're going to need a lot more storage in all of its forms. So today we'll explore the opportunities of pairing batteries with America's first renewable resource, hydropower. But before we begin, I want to remind you that if you'd like to ask a question at any point during the webinar, simply enter your question in the YouTube comment feature, and we will do our best to get to them. And with that, let's get started. So great. In our first panel, we hope to cover all the value streams that hydro owners can achieve by adding a battery system to their facility, whether it's reducing wear and tear, shifting generation, or enhancing environmental performance. There's a lot to consider. So let me introduce our speakers. First, we have Mark Chupka, is Vice President of Research and Programs for the Energy Storage Association, our partner here today. Previously, Mark has served as the Acting Assistant Secretary of Energy for Policy and International Affairs for the U.S. Department of Energy and Chief Economist at the White House Office of Environmental Policy. Welcome, Mark. Next, we have Dr. Thomas Mosier, who is the Energy Systems Group Lead for the Idaho National Laboratory. Thomas helps DOE's Water Power Technology Office understand technology innovation needs to enhance hydropower's contribution to grid needs and opportunities in the energy-water nexus. Welcome, Dr. Mosier. And finally, we will hear from Asa Hopkins, who is Vice President for Synapse Energy Economics. Asa is an expert in the development and analysis of public policy and regulation regarding energy and greenhouse gas emissions. Welcome, Asa. So I'm going to actually just have Mark start us off.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. Appreciate it. I want to thank also the National Hydropower Association for the opportunity to explore the prospects of blending our respective technologies in new ways. Of course, our organizations already overlap insofar as the dominant form of energy storage at the moment is pump storage hydro, which both of our organizations actively promote. But the fastest growing technology, perhaps the fastest growing electricity technology of any type, is battery energy storage. And so I don't see, also the hydro operators have long been operating, even conventional hydro plants have long operated their facilities with some of the same principles as energy storage facilities, in terms of they optimize in real time to decide whether or not to generate now, generate later, they monitor stored energy levels and operate within constraints that sometimes limit the flexibility, the inherent flexibility that come from their operations. So I don't see this new combination as any kind of a novelty, but rather kind of an evolution or a adaptation brought about by the transformation of the electricity sector. And there's still the question, though, why now? And to answer that, you need to understand the last decade in battery technology markets. Namely, battery costs declined by about 90% during the last 10 years, which has unleashed the demand for grid-connected batteries that we see today. And energy storage costs are also expected to decline by about another 50% in the coming decade. Now, how big is this surge in installations? Well, ESA, in conjunction with Wood Mackenzie, recently released an assessment of the 2020 the performance of the 2020 energy storage market. And despite the pandemic, the 3.5 gigawatt hours worth of battery energy storage installed in 2020 was more than the 3.1 gigawatt hours of systems installed from 2013 through 2019. Now, let me repeat that. More gigawatt hours of battery energy storage was installed in 2020 than in the previous 7 years combined. That is a dramatically accelerating market. And projections over the next 5 to 10 years show a significant year-on-year growth as well. These cost declines have led to sort of a tipping point where battery energy storage can cost-effectively serve multiple applications. Just to name a few, they can help integrate renewable energy. They can provide ancillary services such as frequency control, spinning reserves. They can substitute for transmission and distribution network expansion investments. And this is actually something that is quite intriguing and is happening now. And they can provide peaking power capacity. Now, batteries are immensely flexible resources, and they can enhance the value of any generating technology that they're paired with. And we at ESA, we call it storage plus, and we liken it to bacon. You know, everything's better with bacon, from cheeseburgers to salads. And to the point of this webinar is energy storage is so flexible, it can turn one kind of a generating plant into another kind of a generating plant. You know, for example, pump storage hydro was typically paired, not necessarily co-located, but it was built in order to store nuclear generation, overnight nuclear generation, and to be discharged during peak hours during the following day, which turns a nuclear power plant into a peaking plant, or at least a load following plant, which is not the way it was designed initially. Now, in terms of hydropower, batteries can make in the same way that pump storage hydro can enhance a nuclear plant. Batteries can make a run-of-river plant, can turn that into a storage hydro plant that follows load, and which enhances certainly the value of the power produced. Conversely, a pondage or storage hydro plant that follows load or prices and whose generation fluctuates as well as the water flows can be paired with energy storage. And that can preserve the generating profile while actually smoothing out the water flows and providing for less fluctuations, which can have environmental consequences. So you can turn a pondage hydro plant into a run-of-river plant with less environmental impact. So the technical opportunities are vast, and the current economics pencil out, and which is why we're going to be discussing this here today. And I look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Mark. Let me pull Dr. Mosier into this discussion. Dr. Mosier, at the Idaho National Lab, you spent a lot of time talking about and thinking about these value streams, some of which Mark has mentioned. I want to get your thoughts. What are these untapped benefits that you see for hydro owners who want to pair batteries with their facilities?
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. I appreciate being here. And and lots of good remarks from Mark, and so I think a lot of my perspectives dovetail on what he just articulated. From talking to industry, just to start at the very high level, across generation classes, industry is talking about hybridizing their generation facilities. Even if you have a dispatchable plant, be it hydropower, natural gas, etc., there's more value to be had from increasing flexibility, and the financials are starting to pencil. Hence the staggering deployment of batteries in 2020 that Mark referenced. And so flexibility really is the lens through which I view the different value streams for hydro specifically. And that flexibility can manifest itself, or the value of that flexibility can manifest itself at different scales. So if we're talking about an individual unit or plant operations, additional flexibility from battery can reduce operations and maintenance costs. A battery isn't a big physical device that's rotating and has a lot of torque on it, right? And so it doesn't mind if it's ramped up and down very quickly, giving the hydropower plant, the big physical machine, more time to respond. And so as hydropower plants are called upon to provide more of that type of response to balance the grid, batteries can help supplement that and provide value to owners in that regard. Then if you take a step back from that and you think about the sort of the locational value streams, locational value streams can encapsulate things like Cameron, you mentioned the environmental benefits. So, if we're thinking about hydropower as being an integral water management tool, which it is, that's one of the things I find fascinating about hydropower is its integration with the water landscape. Then having flexibility from additional storage, like a battery, can help to ensure that we're meeting this complex multiple set of objectives, ranging from water supply and reliability, environmental outcomes, as well as meeting power system flexibility. Again, on the locational services side, there are units, hydropower at the bulk power system level has long been a traditional black start resource. But if we look at small hydropower, let's say 20 megawatts, 10 megawatts, then that is more likely tied to distribution or subtransmission systems and is not necessarily designed to be a black start resource. And so another value stream that pairing with batteries can enable is enabling a new segment of the hydropower fleet to provide these locational grid services like black starts or voltage support, which is also locational in nature. And then if we go up to the bulk power system and what the value of this flexibility can provide, then we start to get into enhanced market participation. So using the additional flexibility of batteries to co-optimize the hydropower plant, be it non-dispatchable or dispatchable, with the batteries in order to get value from energy arbitrage, so inter-hour energy shifting, participation in ancillary service markets, or capacity and resource adequacy. And so there's a whole gamut of value streams here. And just to highlight a couple of those briefly, on the increased grid services, the locational black start or distribution level black start, we're currently doing a field demonstration with Idaho Falls Power that is interested in this capability, and so are proving that this really can transform a big segment of the fleet. And it's how we think about that for enhancing grid reliability and resilience. And then on the market participation side, we've done a set of case studies articulating the value, looking at CAISO and PJM, where we see the largest value and also the largest sort of location of hydropower resources in these competitive markets, where there's this value, and are developing a tool to help industry take the first step in thinking about what is an optimal energy storage system to pair with their hydropower plant. So more details and future releases of both of those aspects of work happening later this fiscal year. So by end of September, but stay tuned for more insights on that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mosier. Definitely a lot of value streams to consider. And one of the ones I wanted to bring Asa into the conversation, one of the ones I wanted to tease out that both Mark and Thomas had mentioned was those environmental benefits that may accrue from adding batteries to your run-of-river facility or maybe a facility that has pondage. So Asa, could you talk a little bit about your work at Synapse?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Cameron, and thanks NHA for the invite, and appreciate Mark and Thomas giving that great intro. In some sense, what I'm going to do is give a concrete example of a case that Mark gave that categorized in his remarks. Why I'm here today is to talk about a piece of analysis that we did at Synapse for the Connecticut River Conservancy back in early 2020. I take a moment to thank the Conservancy for supporting our work on that. I also want to note that the primary authors of that work, Max Chang and David White, had a conflict this afternoon, so I'd like to acknowledge them as the leaders on this, and if necessary, if the questions get really hard, I may refer folks to them. But the basic question we were looking at is one that Mark teed up, which is whether adding battery storage to an existing ponding hydro facility could allow that facility to operate in a more environmentally beneficial way, to operate more like a run-of-river facility from a water standpoint, while it's still making economic sense for the owner and acting more like a dynamic fleet, load following type facility from a grid standpoint. So if you add storage and change water flow patterns, there's both monetary and environmental benefits to that from the additional flexibility from the storage and the environmental benefits from the water flow part of it, but also costs. And so we wanted to look at what happens. How do those actually balance out in practice? Does it actually can it make financial sense to do this? So the facility we looked at was the 32 megawatt Vernon station, which is located on the Connecticut River, just north of the Massachusetts line. It's between Vermont and New Hampshire. It operates as a part of a set of generators that are strung down the Connecticut River. It's the most downstream of that set. It operates as a flexible generator. It's not quite a purely peaking resource. It does run at all times, but it does shift its generation around towards the time when the energy market prices are higher. So electrically, it's in ISO New England, and it gets compensated for energy, capacity, ancillary services, as well as renewable energy credits that are eligible on various classes of renewable portfolio standard in different New England states. So looking at the plant's economics in 2016, which was the year we had the data from FERC filings, the plant had estimated revenues in 2016 of about $9 million, $9.1 million, of which a little more than half, $5 million, came from the energy markets, $2.1 million from capacity and ancillary services, and about $2 million from RECs. So it's already taking advantage of the sort of value stack that comes in a wholesale market policy context. So if we look at those now from say you're going to change the operations to be more like run of river, there's energy market implications for that. You're no longer moving load you're moving generation into the times of higher load. I'll note that there are multiple ways of defining what the optimal water flows might be from an environmental standpoint. For our analysis, we just assumed that we were looking at an inflows equals outflows type definition. And in fact, because of the uncertainty, it doesn't particularly matter for our analysis exactly how you define what that is. We estimated basically a 3 to 10% energy revenue impact from shifting to run-of-river operations. So, this lines up with what other sources have estimated in the sort of 2 to 6% range. So, just for context, 5% revenue impact would be about $250,000 a year in less energy market revenue. 10% would be about $500,000. We didn't have access to the exact detailed operating history of the particular plant. Obviously, if you're going to get real for an actual facility, you'd want to dive in deeper into that impact. Turning to capacity is a substantial portion of the wholesale market revenue that this plant generates. And here, I think there's some balancing to do between the environmental value and the wholesale market value. If the facility was just pure run of river and risked not actually outputting during the times of the region's summer peak, that could have quite deleterious impacts on the economics of the plant, and it might not be a worthwhile facility at that point. But if it can break run-of-river operations for those few days in July and August and hit those summer peaks, but otherwise operate in a more run-of-river operation the rest of the time, then it can maintain that revenue. So we assume that the plant would shift its operation to be that capacity resource on those few days in order to maintain its capacity value. So let's see what happens if you add battery storage into this picture. So the battery storage provides additional capacity. It could shift the energy from low cost to high cost periods, as well as providing ancillary services. So we estimated, we said, well, what if you put a 10 megawatt 2-hour battery system at that site? And we estimated the combined revenue from the capacity payments, from the energy arbitrage, and from the ancillary services would be about $1 million a year. Obviously, there's some market risk and opportunity in this value. More volatile energy prices from more variable renewable load in renewable generation in New England might mean that you get more out of the energy arbitrage piece in the future. Of course, regional capacity prices are, it's an uncertain kind of market, and you're taking some risk there. So, but that means that the net operating revenue of shifting to run-of-river operation and adding $10 million to battery storage is a net positive impact of about, say, $half to $750,000 a year. So there's, again, costs of $250,000 to $500,000 from giving up the arbitrage value from the hydro storage, but then you get $1 million or so back by putting that arbitrage back in using the battery. And so you end up a net positive on a revenue front. Of course, you don't just get additional revenue for free. You have to make some investment in the facility. So based on the best cost data that was available 18 months ago, we estimated that a 10 megawatt 2-hour battery system would cost somewhere between $5 and $10 million. So if you actually look at it on a levelized cost basis, if the storage costs at the low end of that range, it could have an attractive return, but less so at the high end. So it's kind of a sort of a, if you can make it work kind of proposition at that point. However, even just looking at updated battery prices 1 year later, storage prices have fallen by as much as 40%. So if we redid this analysis, we'd likely see a more positive result on that aspect. And as Mark mentioned, prices may continue to fall even that much more going forward, making this that much more of a win type situation. So just to wrap up, it seems likely there's a future where water quality regulators and other advocates will continue to push for more environmentally friendly water operation in hydro facilities, which could lower wholesale market revenues. But by adding battery storage, especially as the price of that storage comes down, could be a really cost-effective way to get the net environmental value of those hydro assets going up, while also making economic sense to the owners. Essentially, as Mark described, turning what was a ponded facility into a run-of-river facility, but then having it act like a ponded one again from a grid standpoint. So I hope that example has been helpful. I look forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Asa. That was a wonderful example. And as you said, there are lots of cost declines in the battery sector. So those economics you stated look like they might be better today than they were 18 months ago. So that's an important point. I wanted to ask all three of you kind of how these value streams may or may not work together. So if you have an owner who, the sole reason he added a battery facility was to take advantage of an economic product in the market, say Regulation D and PJM, what other benefits might he be able to kind of put on paper in addition to that, just the selling of that economic product?
I guess I'll start out with a couple of remarks. So in my mind, it's really about the optionality. And it depends on the use case, right? As Asa was articulating, there may be some value streams where that like you're giving up this flexibility from the hydropower plant in order to achieve environmental performance objectives, and therefore you're using the battery in a specific way. But even in that specific way, as Asa was articulating, there are ancillary services, there's firm capacity, there's energy arbitrage. The relative value of all these things is in fluctuation. However, I think that there's general consensus that the grid is moving more towards valuing flexibility as opposed to just pure energy. And so independent of how these particular services evolve, there's the flexibility from a battery gives you that optionality.
Yeah, I mean, just from the basics, you can't provide all the services simultaneously. So you can't provide energy if you're providing certain types of reserves and stuff like that. But you can provide all of the services some of the time. And so a flexible asset like battery storage is able to, on an almost continuous basis, ping the markets, decide which blend of services that it could provide in that time interval, and shift its operations in such a way to take advantage of relative prices or scarcity. And so, this flexibility is becoming more and more valued and more valuable. But you can't just stack all of the services and say, yeah, we could do all of these all the time. That just doesn't quite work that way. But there's still a huge amount of value in the optionality, as Thomas said.
Great. We did get a really good question from the audience from Martin Langveld, and it's directed at ASA, but I think some of you might be able to take a crack at it. It says, what would be the physical space or the acreage needed to build that 10 megawatt battery system at Vernon?
So, the physical size of the battery system is related to the amount of energy you're storing, not necessarily the power. So what matters is it was a 2-hour battery. I'll mention that actually most of the value could have been gotten in theory from a 1-hour battery, except for the ISO New England capacity market rules require that it be a 2-hour resource. And since that's an important piece of the puzzle, you wanted to include that. So you're saying 20 megawatt hours of battery storage. I think of a shipping container size battery as being on the order of 1 or 2 megawatt hours. And so you're thinking, sort of 10 to 20 shipping containers worth of space to do that. That's probably ballpark half a football field. I mean, picturing a stack of containers, what that looks like. But Mark or Thomas may have better stats on exactly how much space this stuff takes up.
Yeah, there are some. First of all, it would look like a rest stop parking lot. To some extent, but and 10 to 20 containers be about right. Although the amount of megawatt hours you can get into a container is also increasing over time, and the different types of containers are being used. And the limiting factor is one of the limiting factors. There are requirements for size and spacing between the containers, based on safety codes and that sort of thing. Half a football field. It's not huge. Battery energy storage is actually fairly dense, and beyond the perimeter of the actual containers themselves, you don't need too much. So it's not land constraints can limit, some of the very, very biggest installations, but 20 megawatt hour installation is not going to take up huge amounts of room.
That's great. This is kind of somewhat related, but what are the benefits to being an existing hydro asset owner and you're connected to the grid? I know some new developers have to go through a pretty lengthy interconnection process, which I'm sure this facility would have to go through, but what are some of those benefits of already being connected to the grid when you add batteries?
We've looked a lot at hybrid resources, both new from the standpoint of new as well as retrofitting energy storage, interconnection. First of all, in most of the RTOs is kind of a mess. There's huge queues, there's long wait times, a lot of analysis and study requirements and that sort of thing. If you have an existing interconnection that is not limited effectively, then it varies by RTO. You should be able to make a showing that this fits within the existing interconnection and get some speedy approval. If the battery and the maximum output of the battery and the maximum output of the hydro unit exceeds the capacity of the interconnection, you could either, make some upgrades, which can be expensive, or you can agree in some RTOs to limit your operations such that the overall limitations are not exceeded. So it gets pretty complicated. I think on average and over time, you're better off with an existing facility and an existing interconnection. And certainly there's a cost savings to DC coupling or however you're managing that, the internal integration of the units.
Thomas, one thing I wanted to ask you about is you mentioned the benefits from a plant perspective and then a grid perspective. Are those the same? They're not the same values, but are they being compensated accordingly? Are there some benefits that a hydro asset owner or adds batteries is providing to the grid that may not show up on a on an analysis of adding batteries?
Yeah, well, a couple of thoughts on that question, Cameron. So one thought is that, again, coming back to this idea of optionality and flexibility. So, if you're designing the controls for your market participation strategy, you're going to be optimizing that based on the financial or the regulatory incentives that you have. However, if those incentives were to change, then absolutely, that flexibility can be redeployed in different ways. And so, for example, given the distribution level black start case that I was talking about, there may not be an incentive to do that today, but if you have a battery installed and have that capability, then if an incentive is provided, then you can redeploy it in that way. Another thing to note is that you pointed out the difference between sort of the system level value and the owner value, and fundamentally, I think that is an important distinction, because if you're talking about investing in a battery, someone has to invest in that battery, right? And so if you're an existing hydropower owner operator, you can get revenue and real value from investing in that battery at your facility, even if maybe from a system level perspective, there was a different location that provides the most system level benefit. And as you asked in the previous question, and Mark provided an answer to, talking about the interconnection agreement, interconnection agreements and the complexity of navigating those, and the benefits of modifying an existing agreement versus getting at the back of the queue with a new agreement, is an important value driver unto itself. That could be a year plus of additional revenue that you're able to generate. So definitely important considerations there.
Great. One last question for you all. It's coming from the comments from Rishi Ainsworth. Have there been any physical demonstrations of flow cell batteries linked with hydro? And are there hydro-specific benefits for different battery technology types?
I'm not aware of any flow if he's talking about a flow battery per se, I think there's only a few batteries that are coupled with hydro, and that they're not flow batteries. They're electrolyte batteries. But flow batteries can be very long duration, and they have different scaling properties. They could pair well with hydro in terms of the duration of the flow batteries. But I'm not aware of any such configurations at this point.
Yeah, and just to confirm that, so we've done a survey of existing hydro plus storage systems, and there are only a handful of examples total, and all of those that use battery technologies, they're all lithium-ion chemistries. And the way that I would think about pairing energy storage technologies, be it a flow battery, lithium-ion, or otherwise with a hydropower plant, is what is the right power output that you need, the flexibility in terms of power output, and the right timescales. So, lithium-ion, easier to scale in terms of the power output. Flow batteries better for sort of longer duration. And so that's the lens through which I would make that selection.
Well, great. Thank you. That's all the time we have for the first panel. So thank you, Mark, Thomas, and Asa, for kind of a wonderful and enlightening discussion. We're now going to turn to our second panel of the day. Great. For our second panel, we're going to pivot from the theoretical to the practical. I hope we have convinced some of you that pairing batteries with hydro has the potential to provide lots of value streams. But what does it mean in practice? What are owners and developers seeing on the ground as they pair the newest technology with America's first renewable, hydropower? So with that, for that discussion, we're going to introduce our next panel. Darren Scott is the president and CEO of the Kodiak Electric Association. KEA operates several renewable energy resources, including Terror Lake Hydroelectric Plant, which operates approximately 80% of their generation. Welcome, Darren. And after Darren, we will have Jens Poitz, who is the marketing director for Andritz Hydro Corporation. Andritz is a global supplier for hydropower plants, including the installation of turbines and generators. So welcome to you both. Darren, if it's okay, I thought I would start to you. You are an owner operator who's put a battery on your facility. What's been your experience?
Okay, overall the experience has been very good. Let me just explain a little bit what our grid is first. So we're the island of Kodiak, Alaska. We're a totally islanded system, not connected to the rest of Alaska at all. We run about a 28 megawatt peak, 10 megawatt valley system, and we're a combination of hydro, wind, and then we have battery energy storage and flywheel energy storage that kind of glue everything together. So our hydro plant is 3 units, 33 megawatts. The last unit we just added a few years ago was an Andritz unit there to kind of complete the plant out. And then we've got 2 1.5 megawatt units that run 15 minutes for battery energy storage, lithium ion. And then we've got 2 1 megawatt flywheel energy storage systems that have a very unique application on our system for a particular load that we also kind of incorporate into our grid on occasion as well. We've been doing this for several years. Back in 2005, we basically decided we were about 60% hydro, 40% diesel, and that really wasn't going to be our future. So over a period of time, starting in 2009, we added wind turbines. The first 3, we've got a total of 9 megawatts or 6 wind turbines. We added 3. And then from that, we're able to understand the whole grid stability aspect of it. And then 3 years later, in 2012, we added the 2 battery energy storage systems. They were lead acid at the time. And then we also added 3 more wind turbines. And along the way, we did some updates to our hydro plant, updating the governor control system, and as well as adding a 3rd turbine at Terror Lake to kind of complete the whole package back in around 2014, 2015 timeframe. And then finally, again, with a load-specific issue, we added the flywheels and kind of completed the whole package out. We've been able to be 99% renewable. And with that, the battery energy storage system plays a very key role in how our whole system works together. Again, isolated grid, and our battery system is set up in a total droop control mode, and it's really there for the low frequency side. Our hydro system controls the high frequency side, and then the wind turbines just do whatever they want to do because it's very difficult to control them a lot of ways. I did supply some information on a graph that might be good to kind of explain how our system comes together. Right. So this is a great example of our system here and how everything kind of comes together. Again, we've got 3 megawatts or 3 turbines, 33 megawatts of hydro capacity, even though our peak load is only about 28 megawatts. So what this shows is our system load at the timestamp, kind of about minus 20 on that graph there. We were at 19 megawatts of power. And with that, everything's fine. 9 megawatts of wind power, 10 megawatts of hydro. Everything is running great on the system. And as wind can do sometimes, and it's great we're able to capture this data here, wind went over a period of 60 seconds or so from supplying almost half of our energy in our system down to nothing. And it's not like the wind system tripped. It just the wind power went down to nothing. The wind speeds just dropped off for whatever meteorological reason it was at the time. Now, as you can imagine on a large grid or any time electrical grid, if you lose almost 50% of your generating capacity, your frequency is going to suffer. So the way everything is set up on our system, again, the batteries and the flywheels are set up in droop mode. And so we have the flywheels acting first just because their mechanical ability. And you can see them on the yellow line down at the bottom. They came in first, but again, they're not much power, a megawatt each. and they don't last very long at all. So you can go a full megawatt for 16 seconds, and then they drop back off. And these are detuned a little bit to last a little longer, as you can see on the graph. As the frequency continued to drop because the flywheels couldn't handle the situation at all, the batteries come into play, and you'll see that that's the gray line there. They inject power up, and they're there to help stabilize the system. Because what we have is Terra Lake is a lake tap type hydro project, and so it's got about a 5-mile water tunnel through it with a couple of side tunnels that come in and add water as well. And it can't instantaneously respond. I imagine a lot of hydros can't instantaneously respond. It's fairly quick, but 20, 30 seconds need to go by for it to really be starting to ramp up with its power. And so that's what our batteries primarily are there for, is to provide that bridge. So that's why they're not 3 megawatts for an hour or 2 hours of energy storage. We've got them tuned down to 3 megawatts for 15 minutes, and that might even be a little rich, but it's there for some other issues if we have our system as well that are a little different than this. But primarily what we use them for is just a few minutes of power given a situation like this. It allows our hydro plant, they're Pelton wheel systems, and that's the lake itself. You can see Terra Lake, and high head machines, and they respond fairly well, but it needs to be able to build that time up. So batteries come into play, give time for our hydro plant to respond, and then the hydro plant kicks back on, batteries kind of fall back out as that graph defined, and then it comes on back into play. So our energy storage coupled with our wind and our hydro, we've, kind of knock on wood, never had a load shed event or even worse, a blackout due to the variabilities of the wind power on our system. And really what it is we see Terra Lake is the master energy storage system. It is the overall arching energy storage system we have. It's the biggest battery out there type thing. And then our flywheels, and particularly our batteries, are just a bridge to get us to that point that the hydro plant can take over and be that large-term energy storage that it is. And that's how everything kind of is glued together in our system. It's been very successful, and it's been very cost-effective as well. Our rates today are the same as they were 20 years ago before we started all this process. So it's been very economical for our system and works together really well, all in all.
Great. Thank you, Darren. That's a great example of the wind event. Let me pull in Jens now to talk from a developer supplier perspective. As customers come to you, why are they looking into pairing batteries with hydropower?
On my side, nevertheless, it's really a pleasure. I'm heard a little bit from the first session, also the plus and minus, and I would try to more or less invite you for a small journey. We were starting with the battery topic close to 2 years back, mainly starting with the issue that all the low head turbines are really suffering on the frequency control mode. That means we have seen a lot of mechanical stress for the turbines, and we were searching for applications to reduce the stress from the mechanical stress and therefore the lifetime. And sooner or later, we were detecting that a battery could be an approach, and we were developing the issue. And after that 1.5 years just now, we are very surprised which wide variety of customer requests, developer requests we are more or less confronted. The frequency control things for the low heads and double regulated is for sure a clear topic. The grid services, ancillary services, for sure it's easy. It's a little bit depending on the regions. We are more challenged with that topic in Europe as a liberalized market. It's not a big topic for Asia. But in Asia, we have the topics that in most cases, the investments are defined for the biggest demand, and the biggest demand is only available for maybe 5% of the whole year. Therefore, in most cases, the run-of-river applications are a little bit over-dimensioned. And if we're putting all that topics together, and you are very easily detecting that a battery, and also our project developments are indicating that very clearly, can offer an answer for each stage of the lifetime of an hydropower plant, starting from the very beginning where you are designing your power station based on water flow, on electrical applications, but by taking into account that in some cases you can reduce the size of the units by 10% and adding a battery compensating the 10% of the units, maybe with all the E&M, but also with the civil costs, the civil investments, you are much more quicker for the return on invest. That is for the development period. For the tender period, for the options based on a scenario, we are just evaluating the possibility because the penstock is in most cases dimensioned based on the transient and on the safety dimensioning. The units have to follow the electrical demand from the grid, and that is sometimes an issue which leads directly to the situation that you have to provide a wider penstock, because for the big units, as water and the flow is really having a big impact. And instead of more or less try to have a bigger and more expensive penstock, try to compensate the electrical impact with a battery. That is for the more or less for the green fields. It's a very interesting approach, and we have several discussions with several customers in that regards. If the power station is running in the middle of the age, more or less, it's not the newest one, it's not the oldest one. Everybody is looking for new opportunities, and in the business case, it means the standard, more or less standard, that means grid application, energy arbitrage, but for sure also for all the residual flow issues where we are challenged to more or less have a constant queue to the river, we can offer an opportunity to optimize the tariff situation. It means really to move from the base load to the peak load. And for the more or less old ages, the power station which are close to the situation that they are not anymore commercial feasible, and any investment in extending the lifetime for the mechanical components, or especially in Europe, we are challenged with the situation with the European Water Framework Directive, where you are not allowed anymore to have an opening or closing your unit as you like or based on the market. It's more you have to guarantee an delta head for delta T for the time. Therefore, you are not anymore able to participate in the grid market. And only by using a battery, you can compensating that missing gap between the legal requirements or the technical requirements and your business case. And putting all that together, that are our scenarios we have. That is really the very interesting point. And that is coming back to the more or less the session before. There is no one battery solution we can provide to the market. You have really to take care what is the intention of our customers. Are they more on the intention to base load, peak load, to energy shifting, to island operation? On one hand side, for sure we have the situation regarding an analysis of the existing hydromechanical equipment. We have to check the generator capacity. We have to take care about the grid codes, about the legal requirements, and for sure one of the most important things, we are not really able to change the water, and we are not able, in most cases, we are not able to change the interconnection. Therefore, that limits, and all the additional points in between are the interesting points for us, and really leads to the point that we have really to have a very deep, intensive discussion with the customer to provide the most best fitting solution, not only on technical side, but for sure on commercial side. One issue was raised, and if I was invited, was the Mercedes-Benz Corporation. We have an agreed partner for our battery systems for the DC applications. That is Mercedes-Benz Energy. It means we are not using industrial batteries. We are using batteries from the automotive industry. Why? Because one of the most challenging issues from all of our customers were how you can more or less prove that if I have any replacement in the future, how it's mechanical fitting. And with an automotive industry, an automotive battery, where the automotive industry has a mechanical replacement guarantee for more than 10 years, we are very easily are able to confirm that also in case the battery is sooner or later coming to an end of a lifetime, the single component can very easily be adapted. If you more or less following standard industrial batteries with a high density in the container, for sure, maybe you are challenged in 5, 6, 7 years that all a system is not anymore proven, and you have to replace the batteries, and then you are more or less in the situation, what is the forward strategy for the selection of the battery. And we have chosen Mercedes-Benz as an international partner, also with all the safety and healthy conditions and the global approach, including the certificates as a quality supplier. As a short story.
It's a great story too. I want to take a question from the comments. This is from AA Pasaran. And Darren, it's for you, but Jens, I'd like you to take a crack at it if you could. Do you have any estimate of the payback period or the ROI for the system that you put in at Kodiak?
I'll answer the question 2 different ways. When we put in the wind turbines, we put those in a combination with the second or the batteries. When all that came in, that was about a 6-year payback period on that. And then on down the road, about 5 or 6 years into it, we had originally put in lead acid batteries, and we switched over to lithium ion. So all the other infrastructure was there, all the inverter systems and everything. And that cost was payback within a year, just for the replacement cost of the batteries. We're actually kind of starting to see those as almost like a filter or something along those lines. They're low enough cost out there that we can see those, changing those out every 6, 7 years and not being a cost issue at all.
Jens, any thoughts on payback periods?
Thoughts net and more or less in the understanding of what is the intention of our customers and what is our intention. If you take into account that most of the batteries from the markets are having a guarantee period or an approved period of 10 years and 7,000 cycles or 8,000, depending a little bit, it is a clear target from our side that we are maybe by half of the time for the bigger battery systems. It means target between 5, 6, 7 years should be the option. It's not 100% comparable to a turbine or a generator, because also in case that the battery is starting aging, not the whole battery is aging in once. It's more or less the understanding that one module is coming to a point where the battery healthy condition is indicating, okay, that module should be replaced, not by now and not immediately, but sooner or later. And the big advantage of the battery is that you are not challenged to switch off the whole battery and losing the full functionality of the battery and all your service you are providing. You are only switching off part of the capacity. And if the battery is dimensioned in a proper way, then that changing time is so shortly that it's not really detectable for the operation. For sure, the logical control in the battery has to have an idea that that segment is not anymore available. But normally you're operating the batteries, and really if you are using that in a very strong way, between 10 to 90%, that means you have, in most cases, you have 20% spare. And if you aggregate the batteries in a really clever way, you have, in most cases, not more than 5% to switch off if you have to replace a module out of that system. Means the system is constantly and permanently running, also in case if one of the battery modules is coming to an end of a lifetime. And it's depending on the customer and the operational situation. Are we replacing that by today or by tomorrow or by next week? That's not really a broken point at that point.
I wanted to tease out the benefits from reduced wear and tear. Hydro facilities have lots of mechanical parts. They're being asked to start and stop more as renewables are being integrated onto the grid. How have batteries been able to kind of defer some of the investments, or what are the savings you guys might have been seeing from the wear and tear reduction?
Darren?
I think we've definitely seen the wear and tear on the nozzle portion. They're not dealing near as much with the regulation of the system that the batteries handle that, especially the under frequency side. So that side of our controls, I'm not sure we fully quantified all that yet, but we're definitely seeing a year or two out longer to have to do those repairs than we had to do before. From that side, and then there's other sides on our system that would be more ancillary services to this discussion that we've seen as well. But I would say direct savings would be in the governor control systems and the nozzle systems themselves, just reducing some of that wear and tear on those.
Jens, any thoughts?
I think most of the things are already spoken. What we are seeing is for sure a battery has an impact for the mechanical parts and can be providing and digital things. The problem is for the running power stations to evaluate the amount of money or the value for reducing mechanical stress out of the components. It's in most cases a calculation issue. It's not really there's somebody who can say that is the fact and that is the reason. If you are intending to have each 10 years a major overhaul of the unit, then you are touching some parts of the unit. And for sure, with a battery, you are not really compensating the full overhaul. You need the overhaul for some different issues as well. And to more or less identifying by yourself what is the portion by extending the lifetime using a battery and having less mechanical stress on the component, is that 100,000 euros, it's 500,000 euros, it's $1 million. That is really depending on the calculation concept and the operation of the customer and each independent customer, each single customer. And that is the biggest thing. We were expecting that is a starting point, and that was a starting point for our development for sure. But I think if you only try to target a battery to that issue and have to more or less then select the battery for the proper dimension, the return on investment will be really a challenging issue. That means we would recommend in each case try to put more of the topics, looking for virtual inertia, looking for energy arbitrage, looking for tariff optimization inside 24 hours, looking for black start capabilities, looking for island operation, especially if you have a private company like a gold mine operator, which has really a very cyclic operation of the pumps and not really trusting on the grid because he's far away from the next strong connections. That are all impacts we have to calculate, and that is more or less also the situation to say, okay, what is really the wears and tears of the plant itself, and what is more or less the wears and tears as an impact from the outside world to that solution.
Well, great. That's a great example of kind of the value stacking. Not all the values may stack up, but a lot of them do. So, well, thank you, Darren and Jens, for what was a great discussion. I wish we had more time. But before we go today, I wanted to share just a few final thoughts. Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope we demonstrated that pairing hydropower with batteries can provide a lot of untapped benefits, and that these benefits are not just theoretical. There are owners and developers who are leveraging the power batteries with their hydro units to provide key flexibility, to integrate renewables, lower costs, or maintain reliable systems. Again, we hope you found it informative, and a special thanks to our panelists, Mark, Thomas, Asa, Jens, and Darren. But before we go, there are a few upcoming NHA events that I wanted to flag. April 27th through the 29th, we are hosting our premier policy event in DC, Water Power Week, although it will be virtual. For more information, please visit waterpower.com. Additionally, April 28th through the 30th, we are hosting the International Conference on Ocean Energy, or ICOE, virtually. You can find more information at icoe2021.org. And lastly, we look forward to seeing everyone, hopefully in person, at our new trade show and conference in Atlanta, Clean Currents, in October of 2021. Thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful day.